Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Mod Talks. Once again, my name is Nikki Gil-Albert and I will be your host for this afternoon. However, I must warn you, I feel like I'm going to be multitasking yet again today because while I am the moderator, I am just as excited as you to pick the brain of one of the best in the industry. Many of you might not know, but prior to the quarantine, I was an interior design student enrolled in PSID for a second course. Was working on finishing my final year, so that will pretty much explain um, any uncontrollable enthusiasm I might have later on. I also happen to be a proud owner of a Scavolini kitchen, which was designed in collaboration with Modularity Home, whom we have to thank for this rare opportunity to speak with our design heroes. Now, just to give you guys a brief background, Modularity Home was established in 2010. They are the exclusive distributors of luxury Italian home brands such as Cavallini, Valcucine, Pianca, and Elica. They focus on modular cabinetry systems that started with kitchens, which is, as you all know, the heart of the home, with an expansion on living spaces, bathrooms, closets, and accessories. So basically, all elements that go beyond the kitchen and inject soul into our homes. Now, MODTalks is a webinar series produced by Modularity Home. This is actually our second episode, and this was born out of an idea to inspire and ignite interest in style, design, and architecture. This is a collaborative platform that we share with industry professionals to educate and contribute insight about design, architecture, style, construction, and home improvement based on their professional or personal experiences. And our aim is to encourage conversation about new design concepts and innovations that will keep end users as well as fellow industry practitioners informed and engaged. And speaking of innovations, on today's episode of Mod Talks, we will be zooming into architect Ed Calma's design inspirations, and we're going to be talking about how these result in a unique and innovative approach in the realm of minimalism and modernism. So, of course, we're also going to know how Modularity Home is able to assist in his design vision and transform them into reality. So I'm sure all of you are itching to send in your questions. We will have time later on. So just feel free to send them in. We have a chat box somewhere there, and we will try to address as much of it as we can. Meanwhile, I would like to introduce you the man behind Modularity Home to give us a few words. We have with us Mr. Brian Hontiveros. Hey, Brian.
Hi, Nikki. Thanks again for agreeing to host this second episode of Mod Talks. It's really a pleasure to do this with you. It's been fun, working with you, preparing all these things. It's also a learning experience for us.
I'm
Modularity
loving
Home is
every
actually,
moment.
Modularity Home is actually a dream come true for me and my wife. It's always been a passion of ours to bring in high-end furniture, specifically from Italy, focusing on the kitchens and bathrooms and closets. We believe that the country is ready for such, a level for to accommodate these kinds of products into the homes of the Filipinos. Um, Mod Talks is actually a concept that we've been thinking of during this pandemic, wherein we understand that people are in their homes. They want to learn more about not just our products, but mostly, our design heroes or the architects or interior designers that we work with. So this is actually focused on them. Today, I wanted to thank architect Ed Calma personally. He's a personal friend of mine. He's a mentor. I learned a lot of things from him, not just about the industry, but in general, about life. So I wanted to thank him for joining today, even if I had to force him like 4 or 5 times. So Nikki, please introduce him formally. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for the hard work you put in convincing Architect Ed to join us today. But so let's get to it. Our guest speaker for today is the principal architect of Lord Calma and Partners, architect Ed Calma. He is responsible for designing several iconic residential, commercial, retail, and institutional buildings, As the son of modernist pioneer Laura Calma, Architect Ed grew up with an awareness for modern art and architecture, which was further honed by his time spent studying abroad. He studied at the Pratt Institute in both its New York and Rome campuses, in addition to taking up his master's in science and advanced architectural design at Columbia University in New York, where he got the opportunity to work with architectural and design firm Ellerby Beckett under the mentorship of Peter Pran and Carlos Zapata. He is no stranger to winning awards. He received the 10 Outstanding Young Men Award for Architecture in 2002 for his contribution to Philippine contemporary architecture, as well as the Presidential Excellence Award in 2016 by the Philippine Institute of Architects. He has established a solid track record for award-winning projects like the Gold Medal Awards for the Philippine Pavilion in the Expo 2005 in Aichi, Japan, and at the Expo 2008 in Zaragoza, Spain. On top of that, he designed one of the most outstanding additions to the country, the first world-class science museum, the Mind Museum at BGC. Truly a pioneer and influence in the industry and sought after by many. Let's all please give a warm welcome to Architect Ed Calma. Good afternoon, Architect.
Thanks, Nikki, for the introduction. Yeah, glad to be here. And thank you, Brian, for the invitation. I know my busy schedule doesn't permit me always to appear in these sessions, but made time, so.
His persistence paid off.
Makulit eh. Thanks, Ed. I hope you enjoy this as much as we do.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
any kind of discussion, architectural discussion, design is always exciting for me. Hopefully I get to hear more from the audience and what they think about design. It's not just like me, putting out the ideas, but I think it's important that to know what they're thinking also, right?
Yeah, for those of you who are just tuning in now, once again, we want to let you know that we are open to questions. I'm sure you guys have a list of stuff you want to ask Architect Ed. Just send them in our chat box found somewhere in this Zoom platform. But before we dive in and talk about your current projects, Architect, I think it'd be nice to kind of go back to where this all started. So we're all aware that Architect Ed comes from a family of architects and designers. His father, Architect Laura Calma, who also is one of the founders of PSID, is very much a pillar in the industry. So maybe Architect, you can kind of like walk us through what it was like growing up with him. Like, do you have your first memories of like when you were first exposed to his work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, my dad has very big shoes to fill. Of course, when I was like maybe 3 years old, being in a house that he designed, you don't actually know what design is, but the experience of being in his spaces are truly, remarkable. Like as a kid, because like for example, the house that he built for us, the first house that he did in New Manila. It's not a normal house, As a kid, you would think that there's a main door, right? But you enter this house, you usually enter this house through the garage or through the main gate outside from the street. But when you come in, you see a garden, you see a pool before you go through this open lanai before going inside the house. So I think I was like 3 or 4 years old then. And when I went there just recently, it's small, but at that time it was such a huge space. And my dad, just later on, after talking to him and you kind of try to pick his mind, even if he wasn't really forcing us to be an architect or any designer. He wasn't really, he wants us to discover our own calling. So, but it's not, how can you not notice design? Everything he designed,
yes.
Like the architecture, the interiors, the furniture, the decorative elements. He did all the sculptures in the house. So he was a kind of a Renaissance man. for me. Um,
So
and the
architect, you
office,
mentioned that he. Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, and then he would take us to his office, which is
Mm-hmm.
shown now, and walking on this
Okay.
platform that's like hovering over water
Yeah.
was such an experience. Of course, I don't remember exactly what's going on inside, but I,
Mm-hmm.
I stayed mostly outside, running around these platforms. They actually make a sound.
They make
Um,
a sound. What do you mean, architect?
yeah,
Like they're.
when you walk on it, it makes a like a hollow sound. So and
I see.
you kind of
Which was
just want to play with it.
intentional.
I don't know if it was
I
intentional. But
see.
I remember going to Italy and I went to the Carlos Carpa Brion Cemetery. Going inside the cemetery had the same effect. And we had to go through
Mm-hmm.
sort of a water body, and it had the same sound. So, but I don't know if he went there. I don't think he went to that cemetery, but had the same feature. So it was very very innovative. And the way
Architect.
I mean, recently
Mm-hmm.
now I know, since now I know architecture, and
Mm-hmm.
I, I I talked to him about how he kind of developed his designs, uh,
Yes.
and he told me that the first house that he did in New Manila, he actually saw the site. It had boulders, it had a creek,
Mm-hmm.
and it had a few trees. Had a tropical feel to it, and what he did was he tried to maintain the character of that site. So he worked the architecture and the interiors with the
Around the
boulder
terrain.
positions, right? So
Wow.
there's a boulder at the entrance, a boulder at the pool, and there's a few boulders along the living room. So, and then at that time, it was already, I mean, now everyone wants to be sustainable and green, but
Mm-hmm.
in the 60s, he had already an intention to keep the environment intact, right? And
Yeah.
growing up in Pampanga, Arayat, I mean, as a boy, definitely he would see a rural setting. And
Mm-hmm.
he kept that setting, or he put himself in this project, I mean, in this house, keeping the character of the bukid, no?
Mm-hmm.
That rural feel in this house. I remember even like every Sunday we would eat on those boulders. He would lay banana leaves on the rocks, and we would eat
Wow.
food on the banana leaves. So it was
Architect, do you see this design philosophy of architect lore reflected in your, personal design approach?
yes,
Like, is
it's
there
very
a.
similar. Like I would also approach the site that way. I mean, I would study the site, know it's not only know its limitations,
Mhm.
building limitations by code, but also get to know the character of the site, right, and its surrounding conditions. Architecture is not only the object, but it's also the way it sits on the ground on the site and how it responds to the site or in its context.
Mhm.
Um, so
Right now,
I
architect, we're looking at a photo of the Calma residence. This was designed. Was this the one designed by architect Lore back in the 80s?
Yeah, this house was conceptualized in 1975 and finally built
Mm-hmm.
1981. I remember
But
because
it
I
looks like this could have been built yesterday. It's not dated. How do you do that? It's
yeah. Well, I don't know if he was even conscious of wanting to be modern here,
trends or
but I know
mm-hmm.
that this the approach he applied on this house is similar to how we approach the New Manila house. Because this house, I remember he took us there before buying it. There was an existing house, and it had these giant calachuchi trees all around. No, so
Mm-hmm.
he demolished the old house and worked the new house within the big calachuchi trees, right? And this is a recent photo. So, but before it was
Gorgeous.
more lush than this one, and
Mm-hmm.
he made it all glass, not because he wanted to be modern, but he wanted to see the vegetation outside from the interior space, and the
Mm-hmm.
vegetation was sort of his curtains for the house. There are no curtains in this house, and the house
Wow.
is actually enclosed but elevated, and wind would go through underneath this house through like
Mm-hmm.
slots where wind would cross ventilate the
Cross
house.
vent, yeah.
Yeah, so in a typhoon, it's really cool. You didn't have to, even if it was like in the 80s. I think there was so much power failure,
Yes.
but you didn't have to like turn on the aircon. It was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's that's insane. Architect, also your father did other ventures aside from designing houses. He brought his artistry into signature pieces like sculptures, furniture, and jewelry. What brought on these ventures? Was this like a hobby of his, on something he did on the side, or
My dad's a natural. When you take him to a beach and then he would pick up a few stones and a few sticks, he would end up coming up with an arrangement on a table with whatever he found, you know, on the site. So he's a natural. I mean, he would spend time really figuring out how to make it, nice to him,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So these pieces are really, I mean, it's his best work. He made so many furniture, but I collected these photographs of his best work, which
Architect
really
Ed,
by
if you go
his
back one slide, I posted some of these on my social media, and some people are asking me if it's for sale.
yeah, no, they when my dad
Oh
designed
no.
for clients, he would just do a one-off.
Yeah.
And then of course
Oh
he would
wow.
also have a copy for us. So some of these things are with my sisters, my my uncles,
Mhm.
but most of these furnitures are designed for clients,
Yeah,
and
I
some of
think
them are
they're
still
Wow.
there intact.
yeah, these were designed like in the 70s, and if you look at the
70s and
designs,
80s. So
yeah,
and he would
That's
use like
crazy.
he would use natural whatever he found, the natural material, the natural craft, the
mm,
existing craft. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there was a really nice piece we discovered in one house that he did in Dasma. It was a console made of carved wood and stainless
yeah,
steel,
yeah.
and it was a
Wow.
very artfully carved,
It's this one right here,
or
architect.
panel. No, I think it was a different one.
This is
Yeah,
different one.
but
Okay.
this one's interesting.
Wow.
The Kalesa bar,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, if I was a
I
kid,
really
I would
like that.
probably play around with it, like
yeah,
you
yeah. We still have that. I think
Wow. And if I was your mom, Brian,
know.
and I paid for this piece,
No,
I
but
would
it's
be
so
very
interesting.
upset. Yeah. No, so architect, it makes sense for your dad to get into furniture, but what brought on the jewelry designing? Was he invited by someone? I see here a collection that he did for Hans Bruman.
Yeah, because Hans Bruman used to rent in his building in Paseo de Rojas.
I
So I guess
see.
naturally Hans would see his talent in furniture design. So he invited him to do this collection of jewelry in 1995. It was sold
Mm-hmm.
out. He kept a few pieces. Uh, I wasn't I wasn't here yet. I think I arrived like 96. So I
Mm-hmm.
missed this event. But you
Wow,
can
good
see the
times.
way he approaches jewelry. It's the same way he approaches architecture, like the
Yes,
ear or the
yes.
ring, the finger as his sight, or
Mm-hmm.
the neck, and then there's such a strong materiality to what he does, like
Yeah.
using um, mother of pearl with ivory, with gold, mixing all of them
So
together.
he can do it in a large scale, and then he can bring it
I
down to
can bring it down to a small.
something that fits into your finger. That's insane.
Mhm.
Now, architect, they say the devil's in the detail, and you can tell with Architect Lore's work that he took the simplest things but designed them with so much detail. And I'm sure that he gave you, many nuggets of wisdom. But do you think you can give us like the best design advice that your dad gave you? If you could even pick just one. I'm sure he
Actually,
imparted.
he doesn't give advice. He just says he just says if he likes it or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for him
Okay.
to kind of analyze it, but he just when he sees something, if he doesn't really like it, he would not even say it's bad, right? But he would not say anything. But if it's really good, he would like say, "Wow, that's nice," So
So you would go to him for like that, can you critique my work and what do you think about this?
no,
Did you
I
have that
he
kind of
would not. He would
relationship with
not.
him?
He would
Oh,
not.
not really.
Not.
Interesting. Why so? Why so,
Well,
architect?
you know, I know like having two architects in the same space in the same office might create conflict, and that's why I think he decided he wanted to retire when I came in. So he didn't want to be
Pass the
part
baton.
of it because I know we would like have a conflict because I had a strong design approach as well, and he had his
Mhm.
own. So but I must say, I mean the chapel you showed a while ago, that's his last. I mean, he just did it last year. I mean, for Senator
Mhm.
Angara's chapel, that's where he would be. I mean, the sarcophagus is, and you know,
Mhm.
he one day he brought in um, a piece of metal. I don't know how he found that metal, but he probably picked it up in the materials library we had
Mhm.
we have here in the office, and there was no version. There were no other versions. It was just like this piece of metal. He bent it,
Mhm.
and the way he bent it, he bent it to allow thinking about how this chapel would function or
Mhm.
be sitting on the site. So if you look at the renderings, um, the bent areas would be sort of to open up the chapel to the views and to also
Mhm.
um, indicate an entrance to this chapel. So a
Yes.
singular move kind of created the form of the chapel. Like
It's
for,
like
Wow.
for us, it would take us maybe several versions, several iterations to come up with a final design, right? But he was very
Mhm.
sure of his moves, and that's how he also does his sculpture. I mean, he like folds paper in his office. He's there the whole day when he was still working in the office, folding paper, cutting paper, and um, and then after that that's it. So I mean,
Yeah.
most of the sculptures that he did, the folded metal plates that he did for the Mine Museum and for other clients, it was just a single piece of cardboard which he folded. So all of those were
Mhm.
kind of from a rectangular piece of metal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
It's really a gift,
yeah, yeah,
undeniable,
it's
undeniably. Now,
undeniable.
architect, let's move on to your other design influences. You finished your undergraduate studies abroad. You worked there, specifically in New York and Italy. Can you tell us more about that experience? Like, how different was it?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
when I
Go
told
ahead.
my dad that I wanted to be an architect, you know, in high school, so he said, "Okay, you have to get out and see everything outside.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot stay in the Philippines, and
Yeah.
you have to get out and see architecture in its context." So, and New York was the place. Everything. I mean, art, architecture, industrial design, culture, everything happens in New York. So we decided to enroll in Pratt Institute. And Pratt Institute is actually it's not just good it's not just a good architectural school, but it had a really good ID program, art program,
Mm-hmm.
sculpture. I mean, and all the best professors, artists in New York taught there. So that's why Pratt was the best choice for design to get a kind of a well-rounded, um, influence in design.
Mm-hmm. How
Yeah.
long were you abroad for, architect, before you came home?
Well, I think it was like 10 years, 5 years of architecture school, and then
Mm-hmm.
5 years of working. And then I would come home, a year or two and then go back again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so,
You also took your master's in Columbia University and then worked after for
no,
Ellerby Becket. Am I getting it right?
after Pratt, there was a guy I met in Pratt, Carlos. He was like
Mm-hmm.
2, 3 years senior, and he was already in a firm, Ellerby Becket, with Peter, this the Norwegian guy who worked for Mies van der Rohe. He's one of the partners in
Oh.
Mies van der Rohe office, one of the key
Mm-hmm.
figures that Mies entrusted to do his buildings, right? Unknown
Wow.
guy, right? But they were working together in Ellerby, and uh, he- and then I guess he saw some of my work, and he invited me over to
Mm-hmm.
interview. Um, so it was a very short interview, and in Pratt there would be electives, right? So I took a jewelry class, right? So
Okay.
um, it's one of those electives, though. But I chose, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'll take jewelry. I wanted to do jewelry, and then I thought maybe I can apply these jewelry techniques to architectural modeling.
Architecture.
Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
one of my projects in Pratt, I did a metal model. So I brought that to the interview, and of course they were like going through my portfolio, and then when I
Mm-hmm.
whipped out that model, and they said, "Wow, you're hired." So that was my
End of
so
discussion.
and that that gave us this new opportunity to make
Mhm.
these studies designed through model making in the office. I mean, Ellerby Becket is a huge firm, maybe
Mhm.
like 2,000 people, architects, designers. They had like several offices in the U.S., but they created this small studio in the New York
Mhm.
office that um, that were that was just studying, exploring, experimenting design. At the time, to put it in context, Zaha Hadid was only painting then. You know,
Mhm.
Daniel Libeskind was a professor. Um,
Wow.
Rem Koolhaas was also like writing architecture. So it
Mhm.
was a time when a lot of experiments were happening, and
Mhm.
you can the dryness of the postmodern movement was kind of at its end, and a lot of
Mhm.
people like searching for new things. So there was a lot of experimentation then in New York, and I was lucky
Mhm.
to kind of be in this firm that they allowed us to do to do these experimentations, and we worked on a lot of big projects. It wasn't just houses.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question, architect. This photo that we're showing right now, this is one of the projects you worked on in New York with a
Yeah,
firm.
yeah. This
Mm-hmm.
was the only one built actually, but
Okay.
most of the stuff that you showed a while ago, they were like all metal. The models were all for competition.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I'm just not sure if I'm seeing it right. It's a little small. Is that the one in the middle, architect's what you worked on? It's like an installation,
no, this
an
is a
art
reception
installation.
desk. This is a reception desk for
Okay.
the biggest
I
accounting firm
see.
in the U.S.,
Okay.
Deloitte and Touche. So they
Wow.
spent like $40,000 on this reception desk. These accountants.
Good
So,
grief.
but gave us that freedom to do this thing. So
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about coming home, architect. I mean, you were exposed to all of these greats and all of these, huge projects, and then you eventually come home. Can you tell us what the transition was like? I mean, obviously, things are different here, and
yeah, it was in New York. It was the economy was getting worse. Um,
mm-hmm,
but Manila was kind of booming. So my dad said, "Why don't you try, you know, Manila for a few years. Um, so after taking my master's in Colombia, I decided to come home and try working in Manila. Of course, nobody knew me here, right? So I started again from like small projects like retail.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I did my sister's house as my first project, my uncle's house, and then I got a few retail like Fila. We were talking about it a
Mm-hmm.
while ago.
Mm.
Uh,
Yes.
Aquario Bar,
Mm-hmm.
Restaurant 12, which I was a partner. So whatever. So I didn't know what Manila was like, and I didn't know what kind of audience I would get from these
Mm-hmm.
designs. But I experimented. I collaborated with Kenneth on a bar in Cebu.
I think we're looking at it right now. This is the Z
Yeah.
bar in
So
Cebu. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
the client was very open to create a new look, a new
Mm-hmm.
design uh, approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I still
So
do
working art.
retail, but
Mm-hmm.
I focus now on houses and a few institutions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
still, it's still a although I like working in a small scale now, um, than bigger projects.
Mm-hmm.
It's more. It's not as hectic. It's not as stressful. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but it gives you
I
opportunity to
was.
experiment. Yeah.
So
That's right.
the
Yes.
houses are less stressful, Ed, the architect Ed, compared to
Well,
the buildings.
if you consider where I came from, like being in a corporate firm in New York, and
Mm.
you know, it was a it was a rat race there. So we
Mm-hmm.
I came home like at 4 o'clock in the morning,
Mm.
almost every day
That's
working.
insane.
But here I
But
still get to.
architect, in terms of craft and artistry and creativity, would you say you were able to stretch your legs more when you got back to Manila?
Well, it was
Or
a
is the
difficult transition.
market
You know,
more
I
conservative?
yeah, it was yeah. I had to like adjust. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you saw the work in New York and then seeing the work now, it's more tamed because
Mm-hmm.
it's I don't know, it's just the market. And sometimes if there's opportunity to push it, I will push it. But if of course you cannot endanger the client relationship or the project because
Mm-hmm.
you still have to like maintain an office and keep the staff
That's right.
employed, right? But
That's right.
the competition there, I joined a few competitions here. I love joining competitions
Mm-hmm.
because we did a lot of competitions in New York, so it's not such a big deal for me. But there are opportunities for introducing a new concept, a new design, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was no holds barred for me. I would just um, do everything, even if I lose it. You don't actually
Yeah,
lose the project. You learn something, So we lost a lot of
that's right.
projects because maybe
Mm-hmm.
it was too strange,
Too
too weird.
avant-garde.
Yeah. So
Too expensive, perhaps.
yeah. Oh, yeah, they always think that it's too expensive. So, but I would
Mm-hmm.
never hold back. Only when the client tells me to hold back, I would hold
So,
back a bit.
architect, for the fans out there, I'm sure we have a lot of architecture students watching right now, and I just gotta ask this for them. What is your design approach when it comes to these institutional projects that we were talking about, where you're really able to, like, you have full creative freedom and you're able to do exactly as whatever it is that you want? Like,
Yeah.
what is your design approach?
Well, it's again, it goes into the site. I mean, looking at the site and then looking at the program in the building. Like site, of course, the form will kind of have to kind of be tailor made to the site. Now, there are only two
Mm-hmm.
ways of approaching it. Either you disregard the site or you kind of blend with the site.
Mm-hmm.
And the program would be kind of questioned. Like when I did CSB, College of Saint Benilde,
Mm-hmm.
um, I I asked myself what would be the ideal design school, right? Is it just
Mm-hmm.
a row of classrooms? And of course, you have to question the nature of the institution and come up with a
Mm-hmm.
form that will kind of change how one sees that institution. So to give an example, CSB was all about um, cross-pollinating different design disciplines, so that you have a rich vocabulary and understanding of design, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
way the spaces were planned and all the open spaces that were um, allocated was designed to to create interaction between fashion designers, architects, interior
Mm-hmm.
designers, museum creators. So we made all these open spaces,
Mm-hmm.
two-story, three-story open spaces that people can exhibit, students can
Yes.
exhibit, so that other students can pass through that space and look at what the other disciplines are doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is a design school, right? So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
an example.
Now, architect, does this process change at all when it comes to designing residential, or do you take on a similar approach?
Yeah. Well, sadly, residential still has a long way to go, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the issue is still kind of stylistic, eh? But
Yeah.
I mean, I always try to kind of um, tell myself when I do a residential project, if I take out all the ornamentation outside, like all the materials outside, could it still be an interesting building? Could it still be an interesting house?
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because most of them are just like a box and they kind of put decorations on it just to give a style, right? But
Mm.
the
Mm-hmm.
to see if a good whether a house is good or not is to actually strip everything of its ornamentation and see the space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like my dad's houses are not about ornamentation. I mean,
Yeah.
the last photos that you showed of my dad's house, they were all stripped now of all the furniture or the decorative elements, but still the
Mm-hmm.
architecture can still hold, right? I mean, the idea is still there.
I think the challenge, Nikki, on our part, like working with Ed for maybe 8 years already now, is he wants everything to disappear. Like, so even if it's like cabinet systems, he wants it to kind of blend with the architecture so that
Yeah.
it doesn't really, jump out, right?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I know that residential, it's kind of hard to like have a set template because it's highly customizable.
Yeah.
So it's the same for like all the spaces, living spaces, kitchen spaces. So maybe we can start getting into the residential projects that you are both working on right now.
Mhm.
But before
Yeah.
that, maybe we can take a quick break and invite our audience to, we have a little poll architect going on, to kind of gauge where people are at right now, our viewers.
Okay.
And we want to know, you guys, uh, if you are in the middle of building your house or thinking of renovating it, we'd like to know which area you would spend most of your budget on. So last episode we asked, where do you spend most of your time, but now we're gonna ask, where would you spend most of your budget on? So your choices are kitchen, home office or study room, living room and entertainment area, or master bedroom. So please let us know what you guys think. Meanwhile, architect, how about you? On a more personal note, where would you spend most of your budget on if you were building
All of the
for
above.
your own home? But for the commoners like us, what would you suggest?
Well, the spending is relative, eh, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really, it can be empty. It can, as long as it has design value, spatial
Mm-hmm.
value. That to me is you know important.
Yeah.
I think I
Brian.
think Nikki, it depends on the situation also. Of course, now with the pandemic, if a lot of people, parang based on my experience, are spending more, but there are some who are affected. So of course they won't spend
Yeah.
on their homes. But for the
Mm-hmm.
ones that were locked down, in the past they would spend on jewelry or cars or stuff
Mm-hmm.
that they can't really use right now, and
At the moment, yep.
they've been locked down in the house for like months and months. So now they
Yeah.
want to invest more in the house.
Yeah.
In terms of the the area of the home, for us at Modularity, we started with kitchens.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people entertain, and the kitchen is like the heart of the home.
Mhm.
So that's
Mm-hmm.
where we started. But
Yeah.
now, as people are more exposed to designs and to luxuries and to brands, I think Architect Ed can let us know also. But more people are spending more budget in terms of cabinetry, also in the closet, in the
Mm-hmm.
powder room, in entertainment systems. So it's really all of the above. It
Yeah.
depends, where you're gonna, use high-end materials on certain areas, real stone, or in other areas you'll just use lacquer, or
Mm-hmm.
it's highly technical, but I think that's how it is.
So
When I
you
first
mentioned Brian
came,
Kitchens. Go ahead, architect.
but the kitchen and the closet were the last things to be designed, and they never spend
Yeah.
anything in the kitchen or in the closets. It's always
Yeah.
focused on the living and dining, master's bedroom. But now
Mm-hmm.
it's I mean, a lot of people
It's
spend on it.
changed.
Yeah, change.
Yeah,
That's right.
And the
So let's
kitchens
talk
have
about the
opened up to the
kitchen
living dining.
yeah,
with an open layout. That's right. Well, that's what most people are saying. 61% of our audience members think that they should spend most of their budget on the kitchen. Yep,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
where, at least that's where I spend most of my time these days. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the heart of the home. I think we have some photos of some of the projects, as I mentioned earlier, that you guys are working on, and kitchen is very personal. So it's imperative to know who your client is, what they need and what they want, what their flow is. So maybe,
Mhm.
architect, you can tell us more about this particular client's requirements.
Yeah, well, these clients are entertained a lot. They have a lot of events in their house,
Yeah.
and they entertain guests from ambassadors to politicians to other business
Mm-hmm.
people in the industry. So the kitchens really, work. And
Yeah.
during disasters, it becomes a soup kitchen.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
apparently the existing kitchen, they're kind of deteriorated from the abuse,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So the the client wanted a more sturdy kitchen here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Brian,
it
can
was.
you show us how you were able to translate,
Yeah.
all of that to the kitchen design?
Yeah. So we actually have different kinds of situations. In this particular case, it's a kitchen renovation, as Architect Ed said. The old kitchen gave out. So when we spoke to the clients, they really wanted something that was more sturdy. Um, so we decided to propose Valcucine, and this is a special door called Riciclantica. It has an aluminum frame at the back. So this is
Mm-hmm.
how Architect Ed and I collaborate. He gives us the problem, and we try to come up with a solution together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So this is the actual construction or the sketch of the door, and this is the section on
Mm-hmm.
the center of the photo. Um, yeah. So
Nice.
maybe we can show like the layout of this particular kitchen. It's one of the biggest kitchens that we've done.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's an ongoing project. So
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
because
these
they're
are.
Maybe we.
it's really a production kitchen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Clean kitchen, I mean,
There,
considered a clean kitchen, but it's a production kitchen.
we
It's
have here the floor plan, and
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like maybe I'm
maybe you
trying to
can walk
compute.
us
It's
through
like
it.
80 square meters, and there's one more thing that Architect Ed and I were talking about. It's feng shui.
Mm-hmm.
So when we design kitchens or when Architect Ed designs spaces, there are a lot of times wherein there's a feng shui expert that is involved, and that
Mm-hmm.
translates to having a very strict schedule or having specific items in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
So aside from improving the quality of the kitchen cabinets, they wanted to move around like the cooking, for example, right, Architect
For
Ed?
fire,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
yeah. Well, it's easy to work with a feng shui because they already set where things should be, and there shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
nobody argues with them, right?
yeah,
So planning is easier for me.
yeah.
So
Yes.
once they set it, then I work. I work
I,
it.
think that's a different perspective, Nikki, because I work with, hundreds of different architects and designers, and most of the time they're not happy if there's a feng shui master. But with architect ed,
Yes, because it limits them.
yeah,
Uh,
it changes their design, limits them. But
That's
yeah.
right.
No, it's not a limit. It's really one of those things that you need to consider. I mean,
yeah,
reality.
Mm-hmm.
But as a designer, it shouldn't stop you from creating a nice design still.
yeah, I think if you can integrate like a giant tree in the middle of the house, I guess you
Yeah,
can
you
integrate
can
certain,
make anything
you can make
happen.
anything happen, like certain
I
philosophy.
would,
That's right.
I would revolt if they put an open mouth frog in the middle of that kitchen, which sometimes they put those.
we
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
had we've had requests for red kitchens, and architect ed wasn't really too happy about that.
Mortified to say the least. Architect, I have an ID student question. We were taught about the working triangle. So, like, how does this come into play? Where you have the sink and then the range and then the refrigerator, and how this all like needs to fit a triangle. Like, are you strict about these things or?
Yeah,
Uh,
well, in certain cases, it might not work because they have help and they're usually the kitchen is
Mm-hmm.
well staffed. But
yeah,
if you're alone,
Mm-hmm.
like if you have your own kitchen, it's your kitchen and you're the only one cooking, yeah, the triangle definitely works.
yeah.
But most of these
Mm-hmm.
huge kitchens, they have a full staff.
They have a
There's
full
like I
staff.
Like
think
a
Yeah.
restaurant, it's like a restaurant.
the triangle is actually for like smaller kitchens, or
Smaller
maybe in
kitchens.
Italy, in Europe, or in the US, where the
You have no
spaces are
help.
smaller, you have no help. In this particular case,
Yeah.
it's like several triangles, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
And
mean,
there's
Yeah.
like
they're two big
It's like a
table
production
countertops
line.
yeah,
that they set whatever, and then
Yeah.
another group picks it up from there. So
yeah, you have like four refrigerators. You have like
Mm-hmm.
that cooking zone where it's all stainless steel. It feels like you're in
Yeah.
a restaurant. It's
Yeah.
really different. This particular kitchen is a different concept altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's go to another kitchen. Let's go to another project. Maybe Architect Ed can give us the brief. We're going to be showing the photo in a bit. How many projects have you worked on, by the way, with Architect Brian?
Yeah.
I don't know. Brian
Maybe
would have that count. I
we,
don't
we we
remember.
don't
Quite a
count. We
lot.
don't we don't count. It's a secret.
it's that it's that many. But
No.
sige, can you kind of give us a background on like what this particular
Well,
client, what the requirements
particular
were for this
client was
one?
also a friend of Brian. So, but the
Mm-hmm.
wife is an architect, a Singaporean modernist
Oh,
architect. So, and I'm glad she's on my side, right? Or else the husband would
that
say whatever, right?
yeah,
But she
that'd
has
be a
very
problem.
specific uh, requirements, and we complement in design, right?
Mm-hmm.
We like the same things. We like the same detail. So yeah, the, the
Yeah.
kitchen here was an entertaining kitchen. At the same time,
Mm-hmm.
it should be. I mean, it's very visible from the garden. And it's open to the
It's a show
garden,
kitchen. Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
it's going to be used extensively as well.
I think the experience of architect ed, and the particular client, is very unique because they were also talking to a few other architects before they decided
Mm-hmm.
on working with architect ed. So I think it's also sometimes the philosophies really have to match. When you say
Yeah.
modern, there's many different kinds of, it's mostly the approach, as architect ed would say. This
Mm-hmm.
particular client, they wanted these features. They were very, very specific with, the angled countertop or the
Mm-hmm.
cantilevered suspended island.
Yeah.
They had a basement, so they wanted the smoke to go downwards. So we
Mhm.
used this
Mm-hmm.
It's a downdraft.
particular appliance. So it's a downdraft hood. Yeah.
And then the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
cantilever, she didn't want to see the structure, so
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
a very complicated
It's truly
structural
floating.
Yeah.
proposal. Yeah.
They also wanted
Wow.
some hidden doors. So this is the system that we actually used. In their particular case, it wasn't going into a closet. It was going into the powder
Mm-hmm.
room for this particular space. So
Mhm.
I
I think
see.
this is an example wherein it's an entertainment kitchen where there's a small dining area, living area in the same room. You'll
Yeah.
see later on in the photos that it overlooks the swimming pool.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Ah,
this is
there, right there, the secret
yeah.
door.
So
I
this
see
is
it.
a real photo taken by architect Mark Goes, one of our friends who takes
Mhm.
architectural
Wow.
photos. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
Wow.
So it looks
This is
empty, right?
where
But
everything
the detailing
disappears.
here, the detailing here is just crazy. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
made all
Mm-hmm.
the jams disappear.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Wow.
I
Look
can
at
only
that.
imagine because for the kitchen we did maybe 20 or 30 meetings for the details of the kitchen, and we enjoyed
Yeah.
every meeting because especially because they're personal friends. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a big house, so I can only imagine with architect Ed, like in terms of the details for all the other rooms and all the other areas, it
Mm-hmm.
must have been exciting and challenging at the same time.
Beautiful. I wonder if they have toddlers. I highly doubt it.
They
They
do,
do.
It's
they
such
do,
a
They do.
pristine.
they do.
They do. Oh
Yeah.
my
When we
There's
built
an,
this house,
there's
there were two
and they and they
newborn
also have a dog.
kids.
Wow. Which is a good thing that the material is scratch proof.
Yeah. So this particular kitchen, we worked with a company called Ashton Corporation. They do,
Yeah.
they represent brands such as Decton and Silestone. And, these are mostly the materials that
Countertops.
we use now for stone
Yeah.
and countertops.
Let's move on to the next project. Yeah, maybe architect that can give us the brief on this one.
Well, here the client also entertains, but within family members and also his business partners. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's always a weekend thing that they have entertainment
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
house. So the space is like an open space, big open space with a room for the boys to have poker and whiskey
Mm-hmm.
and cigars, and then the kitchen would be able to open up completely to the living area to
Nice.
kind of serve the living area.
Yeah.
So the kitchen had to be also very um, sturdy and
Mm-hmm.
resilient to abuse,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
and showing the kitchen, to me, I don't like too many shelves that you can display a lot of things. So
Yeah.
we wanted also a very minimal kitchen that it wouldn't look like a kitchen when you open the doors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have a
So,
video that
Brian,
we
what did
can
you use
show.
for this one?
We The previous kitchen was Cavallini, and this one is
Mm-hmm.
Valcucine kitchen. It's mostly
Fettuccine.
made out of
Okay.
glass. They have certain
Wow.
special features, like what we call the new Logica system, wherein
Mm-hmm.
you slide the door down or you flap the door up. Instead of having
Mm-hmm.
several cupboards, um, you only have a singular panel that's like 4 meters wide. Yeah,
Wow. And then it opens up to everything and
yeah,
then hides it all in one
yeah,
go. That's
correct. So
insane.
So I think they're also all about dematerialization and making sure that they use less materials to achieve more things.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a
Mm-hmm.
heavy word, huh?
Yeah.
You want to define it,
Right.
Because we will be having a pop quiz
or
later
there's
on for our
technical difficulties, so
listeners.
I have to distract them because there's technical difficulties. So I have to invent something.
Yeah. Sige,
Yeah,
sige.
here.
Oh,
So
there
here,
you go. Okay.
yeah,
So that's what you were talking about. Where,
yeah.
aha, look at that. The back panel with magical doors. What a
Yeah.
dream.
So I think 90% of our sales are actually in Scavolini kitchens, but there are some clients who,
Mm-hmm.
they want something different. They want something more.
Yeah.
Um, so we decided to work with this company called Valcucine. They're based in the Veneto region near Venice, so they're known for glass.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the founder here is really a genius or crazy guy. Who
Mm-hmm.
thinks of all these new concepts, and this was actually invented in 2001. So it's a very
Mm-hmm.
old model, but it's still very relevant up to today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, gorgeous. Now these look, I mean, pristine. They're very clean and they're meant to be because they're show kitchens. Let's talk about the auxiliary kitchen. Uh, like, what are the differences? I mean, obviously, apart from yeah, aesthetically, uh, are there requirements for the auxiliary kitchen? Like, do they need to be able to take a beating more than the show kitchen? Maybe we can talk about that. And what
Mhm.
technology do we have to support this?
Yeah. Um, I think Architect Ed's projects are mostly big houses, and it's quite common now that there's two kitchens, the main kitchen and the service kitchen. Some
Yeah.
people call
Mm-hmm.
it clean and dirty, wet and
Like the
dry.
auxiliary kitchen is for heavy, oily cooking,
Hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
While the clean kitchen is just very light cooking,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
I see.
So I
baking
think
And
pasta.
so. This is an example. This is an example wherein it's in a basement. One of Architect Ed's projects.
mm-hmm.
They they wanted
Basement,
like
okay.
yeah it's a very big space. They wanted a range that's very strong in terms of fire.
Mhm.
They
Mm-hmm.
wanted exhaust hoods that are
It's a
restaurant
lower
grade.
ceiling too, no?
Yeah.
Well, this is not a rendering, it's Brian's rendering, but the whole kitchen is all stainless steel. The ceiling, the walls are all stainless.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mas pangit daw kasi kami nag-render.
yeah.
Ganyan si Ed.
Disclaimer pala yun.
Medyo namahirit eh.
But this is beside an office, the owner's office. So he wants to also
Mm-hmm.
entertain in this kitchen with
Yeah.
business partners.
Yes.
So it had to be also designed, but
Yeah.
then
Mm-hmm.
really sturdy, and you can wipe it off easily with a rag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
With
gorgeous.
I
So
think
this
with
one, Brian, is
this is a Scavellini
what are
kitchen.
your plans for the Scavellini? Okay.
Yeah, so we used stainless steel countertops,
Mm-hmm.
stainless steel doors. There's a separate section for the refrigeration and the baking. This
Mm-hmm.
particular storage on the lower right would have pull-out tables, so that
Wow.
they
Okay.
can also use it as a countertop space.
Mm-hmm.
With Architect Ed, we were talking about it earlier when we were planning this. He's very detail oriented. So even if it's a service kitchen, even if it's tucked into the basement, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
not exposed, he really scrutinizes or criticizes our work for the
Yeah.
betterment of the project.
Yes.
May kabig.
Alright. Meron. All right, well, let's take a quick break. Once again, reminding everyone to send in their questions. If you have stuff that you want to ask Architect Ed, or yeah, just send them in our chat box, and we'll try to get to uh, many of them before we end today's session. But so yeah, so we've been talking about kitchens and how important it is to recognize the specific work areas in the kitchen to make sure that both the design and the function are maximized. So let's get into even more detail about function and just new ideas and innovations to make the space work even better. I'm sure architects are always on the lookout for what's the next big thing, like what's the next new technology that they can kind of use in their projects. So maybe we can go through that, Brian. You can uh, show us what you have.
We're talking about the innovations, the new
Yep,
stuff. Yeah, sure.
new stuff. So
Um,
these are still these are still concepts, no?
yeah. Some of these are real, but it's not widely
Okay.
known. So this is a venue for us to share it with the audience,
Mm-hmm.
whether new architects or designers or end users who are looking to build or renovate. Um, this, for example, is we call it in vitrum. It's by Valcocine.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about glass countertops a lot. Glass doors is also very common. With most
Mm-hmm.
brands, have it. But in vitrum is actually a glass carcass. So
Okay.
the entire kitchen is made out of glass and just some aluminum supports. So I think it's fully recyclable,
Mm-hmm.
heat proof. I think it's pandemic proof. You can easily wipe it
Pandemic
off
proof.
with
Okay.
wipe it off with alcohol. I think the material is
Yeah.
very relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from that,
Mm-hmm.
it's really beautiful. Yeah.
And our next
So
our
that
next
these are just realizations of the same system.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Look at that. Glass.
And then we were talking about this is a Scavellini system called Mia.
Mm-hmm.
It's a new kitchen designed by Chef Carlo Cracco. So this is more a professional type kitchen. It would actually be a good solution also for the first house that we talked about earlier. Um, but this particular photo, you see that we can use LED grow light and put it on top, on the top portion near the ceiling, so that you can grow your plants indoors. I think it's again mga plantito or right?
Plantitos and plantitas. Yeah.
Yeah. Di
That's
alam ni
right. So this is
di
the
alam ni Eden.
kitchen.
Yeah.
It's the latest craze. All
Yeah.
right, maybe you know what? This one is maybe we can go back to the clean kitchens a while ago. I think we may have skipped some of them. We may have jumped into, but I mean, I think it's good for everyone to see.
Yeah,
We also, yeah,
it's
if we can
it's
go back
the
to
one
that.
with the service kitchen. There was another kitchen
Yes.
before that. It's in the same house. So just to
Okay.
jump back to this.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the clients wanted something that was like brand new. This one is just
Mm-hmm.
launched last year by Valcocina. It's called Logica Celata.
Mm-hmm.
If you notice when the door closes, even the
Mm-hmm.
countertop is hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. And it comes as is this customizable or does it come as this
It
big
comes in
panel?
different sizes. You know, it can be longer, it can be
Mm-hmm.
shorter, can be deeper. If you're gonna put a kitchen inside, of course, it's much deeper. Some people
Mm-hmm.
use it as a bar, so a standalone item. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. All right.
so that's also part of
Do
the
we have any
innovation.
more? Yeah,
Um,
I mean, do we have any more
yeah, this is the
because I'm
CEO.
sure everyone's just wanting to see
Yeah,
what's next for in terms of like kitchen design.
yeah.
Wow, there
So
you
these are
go.
the details of that logic, the
Mm-hmm.
Chelata kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Gorgeous. All right. Well, okay. I do we want to talk about because I'm not quite sure if we want to jump into the questions already or do we want to talk about there you go. We have more.
There's a few more things here.
Yeah.
The, I think in the appliances section of the kitchen, you
Yeah.
see this hood by Elica,
Yeah.
wherein,
Mm-hmm.
again, it's about material. So the one on the left is in solid surface or Korean, and the one on
Mm-hmm.
the right is in glass or black glass. So it's actually easy to clean. Sometimes when you use stainless steel, you know, there are marks on the stainless steel where it's hard
Streaks,
to,
yeah. They
there's
leave
streaks, it's
streaks.
hard to take out. But
Mm-hmm.
in this particular case, you know, because of the material, it's much better to use on top of a kitchen cooktop.
That's
And then underneath,
gorgeous.
it's not really visible here, but it's cast iron grills underneath. This second
Mm-hmm.
one is a downdraft system wherein it's a
Mm-hmm.
two-in-one appliance with an induction cooktop and exhaust in the middle called the Nikola Tesla
In the middle.
in the
Wow.
middle. So the smoke goes into the middle.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of solutions wherein, you know, the exhaust goes downwards instead of,
Instead
you know,
of up.
instead of
Mm-hmm.
upwards. So I think Architect Ed, that you guys use a lot of this now because you don't want your ceilings to be,
Yeah, we don't like the suspended hoods, you know.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
the typical suspended hood. So I either want to flush it into the ceiling and have a downdraft,
yeah,
or that's
Mm-hmm.
the one you showed me a while ago, like an asymmetrical range hood. You
hmm,
know, is nice.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. These are
Like
like
Yeah.
sculpture,
so,
yeah,
yeah,
art
because
pieces.
the trend also now is to make that kitchen disappear and make it part of the architectural composition. You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think a new concept that's being developed now is the surface being a cooktop itself. So whether it be
Mm-hmm.
in wood or in stone, you have burners underneath the material, and then there's like
Mm-hmm.
invisible buttons. But this one is just a concept
that's
for
it.
now. It's something that's, you know, could be
For the
thought of.
die-hard minimalists, yeah, this is would be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you'll probably burn yourself,
Wow.
but
I probably would.
but
All
it's
right, let's talk about okay, let's talk about how spaces are since we were talking about it. how spaces are, how you can marry all of these different areas into, especially if you're given a small area to work with. Like, you know, how do we go about combining the kitchen with the dining without it, really
Yeah.
bothering the other area.
Think, Nikki, you're right. The background here was when we were discussing, property values are increasing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so this concept by Scavolini called box life was actually developed for New York,
Mm-hmm.
by a New York designer, HOK. Um, so it's really multi-use spaces. So architect and I were discussing that, in apartments or in like smaller projects wherein we work together, this
It's
could
getting
be,
smaller and smaller, the
yeah.
spaces. So the
Yeah.
kitchen is really encroaching into the living space. So,
Yeah.
but you want to make it disappear when you don't need it.
Mhm. Yeah, so here you see those receding doors or accordion doors where if you don't need it, you can just tuck it in.
Pull it
Looks
down.
like a wall,
Mm.
right? So it's a
Yeah.
clean concept. And then we also have in the next photo what we call the Scavolini gym space. It's also
Mm-hmm.
interesting because, as we exercise, right after you can take a shower right away because you're already in
Yeah.
that space. We all can't afford like a standalone gym inside our homes, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
exercise in my daughter's room. Um, so I think this is a good concept wherein,
Yeah.
you see what this is called the Swedish ladder, where you can do Pilates and stretching.
Mm-hmm.
And then all these other items like the sink and the mirrors also bolted onto the same ladder. So it's a entirely interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
The bathrooms are getting bigger and bigger to accommodate exactly like an exercise room inside the bathroom.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
That's right.
they hang out a lot in the bathroom. Like
Yeah.
so,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it became a more important space as well in a home.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And
All
then
right.
I think in the next photo, as you see more spaces open up, you don't see a lot of
Mm-hmm.
rooms anymore. The kitchen's not in a room. The dining room is not a separate room. Um,
Yeah.
this particular system by Pianka called Unless is a unique concept wherein you can do shelving from floor to ceiling, and it divides two rooms, even if
Yeah.
you're in
Yeah.
one big space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's
it's a
still
way of like
a
segregating the street,
demarcation.
but yet still open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And you can put like your is this what you call the mini museum? Was it Architect Ed or Brian, where
Yeah, yeah. A
you
lot
can
of
use your
people are collecting a lot of
collections
stuff
to.
now, and they need
Yeah.
space for all these collections. So uh,
Yeah.
it's not anymore books. Parang nobody reads books
Yeah.
anymore because the book is in your iPad.
Yeah.
So it's
Phone,
mostly
that's right.
object. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a recent request where they wanted to put all their whiskey bottles, they have a whiskey collection.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the specific system that they wanted because they had different bottles and different heights. So
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
it's a matter of changing the location of the shelving.
Yeah.
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 So
No, I
in,
can
in the
imagine that would work perfectly.
yeah, I think in the next photos it's all about bedrooms and bathrooms
Mm-hmm.
wherein you get a room like this, which usually would be a bedroom, sometimes it's
Yeah.
converted into a walk-in closet, and then the
Mm-hmm.
bathroom is also part of that room.
Connected. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
On the right side, it looks beautiful, but to be honest, there's not a lot of people who request for like closets that have no doors because of the dust
Mm-hmm.
here in
Yeah.
in, in Manila.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Architect Ed?
Yeah,
Just
not advisable. You get dust on the. Believe me, I had this experience. I made the mistake of opening my closet before.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So
And here I am writing down all of the design mistakes that I did. Install doors.
There's no no there's no right
Yeah.
or wrong naman. If it's a room
Yeah.
that's far from the street level, and then you can close it off
Yeah.
properly. But then again, if going back to that photo, if you have that kind of system, you need your clothes to be
Mm-mm.
coordinated. It looks like a retail
yeah,
store,
Yeah.
you
right?
can't.
That's
Yeah,
right.
It's not sustainable if you
Yeah.
have all
your
these.
clothes have to be also expensive here or
Yeah.
well designed.
Yeah.
But you can still do
Especially
this.
now that you hardly use your clothes for going out. They're really just there.
Nowadays,
So it would make more sense to close it off.
Yeah.
I think this only works when you have a HEPA filter also inside your walk-in closet that will
Yeah.
take out the dust
That's
from the
just going. Yeah.
Yeah.
because you yourself produce dust. You shed off your
Yeah.
skin, and that
That's
that
right.
that's that comprises dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So,
You have
like
another one over
sometimes,
here?
yeah, sometimes if this particular photo is by Bianca, you see that the doors on the left will match the side table, the small
Mm-hmm.
circular side table, and also the base of the bed. That's all the same walnut, wood finish.
Yeah.
So it's in terms of design. I think Architect Ed, it's important for him to, everything matches and goes together.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I don't like exposed handles. I like it to just disappear. And
yeah.
Yeah.
This is a example of
It's
an
more
entertainment.
seamless.
Yeah,
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
entertainment system. Where this one's all custom, so it depends on. Nowadays, the TVs, like in Italy, you see all the catalogs. The TVs are like 42 inches, but now,
Yeah.
with the TV systems going in terms of price going down, we see a lot of TVs that are 75 inches, 100
Yeah.
inches. So all these things, we consider that when we design these spaces together. Yeah.
Yep.
I think lastly is something interesting that we were talking about. Initially, there's like clean kitchen, dirty kitchen. Now, I think there's also clean laundry and
Mm-hmm.
dirty laundry, pun intended.
Auxiliary
Yeah,
laundry. Dirty
auxiliary laundry.
laundry, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So there's that regular labahan or laundry outside
Mm-hmm.
at the back, but then you also, I think with Architect Ed, he designs laundry rooms on the second floor, right?
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of clients are requesting a laundry up on the second floor, like
Yeah.
for their special clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Intimates
so
and
this particular
all of those
system
things.
by Scavallini, you see that the ironing board is integrated into that mechanism. If you flap it up and
Yeah.
then you rotate it, so everything is again is hidden.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
Above that sink is specific for hand washing. So there's a decline wherein you can rub
Mm-hmm.
your clothes while you're hand washing it. It's also
Nice.
ergonomic because you're standing up while you're doing it, and then you have that
That's right.
hanger rod right on top of it to dry like smaller things.
Mm-hmm.
I think they
So
also
this
use this for also washing hair. Like it becomes sometimes a, you know
parlor,
a parlor. Yeah.
yeah,
A salon, a
yeah.
home salon.
Everything has
All
to be done in the
right.
house now.
I
They're
know
doing one now.
exactly.
The
Yeah,
laundry is
working
also a
out.
salon
Yeah,
where they dye their
Yep.
hair and they.
yeah.
Yep. Oh wow. All right. Well, thank you very much, Brian, and of course, Architect Ed, for walking us through those new innovations. Now is the time that we've all been waiting for. All of our audience members have been sending in their questions. So we have a couple lined up already. So if you guys want to send in more questions, please feel free to do so. We'll try to go through as much as we can. But for now, maybe I can start with a question of my own. Architect Ed, what are your design pet peeves? Like when you walk into a space that you obviously did not have anything to do with, what makes you cringe?
Well, like misalignments. If
Okay.
the joints are not lined up, I
Mm-hmm.
I get crazy. So I train my staff to really figure out tile modules that it needs to align
Yeah.
to, the wall modules. And it doesn't have to be completely aligned, but be very conscious of how these lines,
Mm-hmm.
converge in space. Because
Yeah.
you definitely can sense a mistake that you never really figured out your tiling in the beginning when you start
Mm-hmm.
constructing your bathroom and there's a small tile left over on the edge. That's drives
Yeah.
me crazy.
Okay, so I hope our future architects are taking note of that. Let's move on to our first question from an audience member. This is coming from an anonymous audience member. He asked, "Good afternoon, Architect Calma. Thank you for the very insightful talk. What are your opinions on symbolistic design approaches? And do you still find it relevant in today's context?"
Sorry, symbolism,
Symbolistic design.
symbolism.
Nahihirapan na si Ed.
I don't know what that means.
I did not ask this.
Maybe you can like elaborate what that symbolistic means.
Symbolistic design.
Symbolistic design. Okay, maybe we can have our staff do a quick Google search so we can move on to
Sorry,
the second
I'm
question.
a bit maybe that's a new thing that I never really uh,
Possibly, I
encountered.
haven't heard of it, but okay. So we'll get back to that question in a bit. For question number two, have you experienced having projects that go beyond the residential scale, perhaps government projects, and how would you approach government projects or public spaces in general?
Yeah. Well,
Government.
when I first started, my dad had connections with the government, and we worked, with government a lot, especially during the expos, um, and we're doing a couple of things now, like an airport. Um, so as long of course, government would not know your profession, right? So they rely on you for everything, on advice, right? So and they're pretty open. I mean, I think if you're convincing enough that you know more than them, they would listen. Like, for example,
Mm-hmm.
we're doing this particular project in Baler, one of the last projects that Senator Angara um, budgeted before he passed away. So he wanted to build an
Mm-hmm.
airport for Baler as a gateway to Baler. So, and we were working with Kaap on this one. Although they're
Mm-hmm.
designing it and doing all the drawings, we're kind of helping them out, conceptualizing and also figuring out how it could be uh, built faster, better, less labor, all assembly on site
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
eliminate all this mistakes on site and all this like all this you know like how workers sometimes screw up things on site when you don't
Yeah.
supervise, but
When you're
this one
not
is
there,
very well
yeah.
modeled. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
so government is very cooperative when it comes to designers. They
Mm-hmm.
for expos, for example, we represent the country, so they want the best. They want to have a best show in the expo, so they
Yeah,
give us full support. Yeah.
that's great. All right, let's move to question number four for Architect Ed. How do you see the future of design and the changing context of our world given the effects of the pandemic?
Yeah, I knew that was coming.
Haba yan.
Well, there's a lot of figuring out that needs to be done. I
Yeah.
think we have not really experienced the full effect of the virus, in terms
Yeah.
of, but that right now, how the city is not working
Mm-hmm.
because everything's at home, on
Yeah.
hold. You cannot travel through the city when you can have a city that's, where you can walk to work or go without taking the car, right? But now we rely so much in mass transport, but you can't take mass transport. So you know I think everything has to go back to just basic, um, standard city planning, like
Mm-hmm.
um, people
Which
need
you
to
also
like
do,
walk to
right,
work.
Architect?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You do
Just
you do master planning.
do master planning.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. Um, this next question is for Brian. He says, "How do you service if there are issues or defects?" I assume, given that these are Italian
Yeah,
brands.
yeah.
So,
We actually go through training, so we know how to handle, the products that we carry. That's very important with me specifically.
mm-hmm.
Before we bring in brands, we make sure that, we know how to service it. And then of course we have a team, behind the scenes who make sure that, it's done if there's a problem. We
Mm-hmm.
don't, as architect Ed knows we don't really expand that fast. And there are a lot of brands who come to us and who want us to represent them, but we choose to focus on specific things so that, we're still specialists in what we
Mm-hmm.
do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks, Brian. This
No
one
problem.
is from uh Evenson. Sian. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right.
Baka that's
Architect
Benz.
Ed.
Baka that's Benson. I asked
Okay,
Benson to
yeah.
watch it.
So
Yeah,
Benson.
yeah, yeah,
Hi.
maybe.
head. Okay.
No, Benson.
He says, Architect Ed, which projects of yours got Architect Lore's strongest approval? Or which one, I guess,
Baka
I
hindi si
suppose,
Benson.
which
Yung
one
si
was
Benson
most
ba yan?
suited to his taste?
He liked my house. You know, my uncle
Okay.
also liked my house. Very small, compact. Compared to his
Mm-hmm.
house, it's huge. But he liked my house. He liked my roof deck, my green roof. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
he liked the way I made the spaces very efficient. You know, on a 380 square meter lot. You know,
Mm-hmm.
because I grew up in New
We
York. I
got
mean,
yes,
and
yes.
I know the value of space, and my house is like a regular townhouse in New York. Real
Mm-hmm.
estate is expensive there, so you can't really waste
Yeah,
so much space.
that's right.
So he likes the
So
efficiency of my house. Yeah. But
every
in terms
area
of like the bigger
maximized.
projects, yeah, he likes the Mine Museum, and he
Mm-hmm.
likes some of the museums that we're doing now. Yeah, so yeah, he's always supportive.
Okay, let's move on to a question from Janina Dizon. She asks, Hi, Architect Calma. Who do you admire most among the international architects?
No, many. I don't have a singular person, but I have a lot of books in my library, and I look at a lot of different projects and looking deeply how they were made. You know, especially
Mm-hmm.
like some South American architects. You know, they're pretty much similar in terms of geography and materiality, similar to the Philippines. So I look at them most. Yeah.
There,
So a
I,
lot
We
of
have a
South
co-
American. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Brian.
there's a question from a certain Daniela Calma.
I
If
was just gonna read this.
if 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 you weren't an architect, among what other design disciplines would you have liked to pursue?
Boy, maybe
Ayaw na yata maging architect ni Daniela eh.
yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't go to design, I guess. I would go somewhere else. Like business,
Mm-hmm.
barista.
creative business, yeah. Some creative business, like
Yeah.
like real estate, but done in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Still involving some building, but more like real estate.
Okay. It's funny how I saw that name also, Danielle Calma. I was thinking this is probably your daughter taking up architecture.
Yeah.
All right, we have one from Francisco Nabor. He says, Hi, Brian, and hi, Architect Ed. This is Franco watching from Italy. Thank you for
Ah,
sharing your experiences and ideas. A question for Brian. He says, There are a lot of other Italian kitchen brands, but what made you decide to specifically bring Scavolini and Valcucina to the Philippines? Is it the market or the philosophy or some other factor?
Hirap din question ni Franco, Ed.
mm,
Trinain mo
learning
yata
it.
yan. Okay. Yeah. Hi, Franco. With Cavallini, they're the biggest in Italy, so it was really an honor to be working with them. They have the flexibility to do different things, whether it be modern or classic or industrial or transitional. So it gives us freedom to allocate in terms of what the client really wants. We have something for them.
Mm-hmm.
Valcocine, to be honest, we really didn't consider it, during the start because we thought that the market wasn't really ready for such a thing. So we had to wait a while before we actually engaged with them. So they were approaching us. The nice thing with starting out with kitchens is that it's easy to get into other things already because the kitchen's probably the most difficult in terms of Italian products. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so once the market was ready, we saw a lot of other brands, even in other industries, like in the car industry, Rolls-Royce came in, um, Lamborghini came in. So we felt that the market was already ripe for the picking for a brand like Valcucine. So Valcucine is really different. You can't really see anything like it, wherever you go. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of different brands in the market, but the mechanisms, the materials, it's very original, and it's hard
Yeah.
to copy. They're the only ones probably who don't collaborate with other architects or designers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They do it themselves, so they're very well respected in Italy and in the kitchen
All
industry.
right.
Thanks, Franco.
It's like a car, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Luxury car.
We we have a question for Architect Ed. This one's coming from Alex Medalla. He says, "Hi
Ah,
Ed, this
hi,
is Alex.
Alex. How are you?
Just curious, was it difficult for you to transition from your international design lineage of Carlos Zapata and Peter Pran to your current design language? As you said, it was economically challenging, but what about from a creative point of view?"
I mean, at a certain point, you have to kind of create your own path. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
Carlos and Peter taught me a lot, but I'm not. Maybe I don't. Um, I have to create my own and a more simple approach. And I like being simple. In fact, I like the thing to really be, you know, ultimately simple. I mean, before it was crazy. We did a lot of crazy things. I mean, you can see from all these um, developments. But I tend to be
Mm-hmm.
more simple now. Try to
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of things with a simple move.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for that question, Mr. Medallia. This one is coming from Reggie Yu. He's asking, what is your design philosophy, considering that many areas that may be affected by sustainable design? How will you determine which options to pursue? Also, if sustainable design technologies are implemented, do upfront costs exist that may affect the construction budget?
Some of those sustainable strategies are sometimes economical. I mean, in the long
Mm-hmm.
term. So even if you
Yeah.
spend it on the onset, in the end, you would save a lot. Norman
Yeah.
Foster also poses that same argument. I mean, his buildings are very, very efficient long term. I mean, they save a lot of um, electricity, fuel in the long run. Um, low carbon footprint. So being sustainable is not exactly a negative but it's a
Mm-hmm.
long term thing. And I mean, if you see now our city, this is a bad example of not being sustainable. I mean, in terms of also business, right? I mean, if you have a city that doesn't work, who would want to be here for business? Right? If you have
Mm-hmm.
like power outages, your electricity rates are astronomical. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of talk about having sustainable cities, cities that um, do you can do business
Mm-hmm.
in a very inexpensive way. So it's not a detriment. I mean, but also sustainability is not the most important thing, but also the having a distinct character um, of a city. It also creates a an interest. Like
Mm-hmm.
now cities in Asia, they all kind of look the same, right? The buildings all
Yeah.
look the same. So sometimes you don't know in a picture whether that's in Singapore, in Hong Kong, or in
Yeah.
Manila. Right? So
Exactly.
sustainability is one of those things but you don't put it in the first category. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it has to be one of those prerequisites. But the design is all about having this. It's something intangible, something that makes people go to the city, live in the city, have
Mm-hmm.
a good time in the city, psychologically, physically.
Mm-hmm. All
Carlos,
right. Thank you,
I mean,
architect.
Carlos's project. I mean, one project he did in Vietnam, that
Mm-hmm.
detects the tower that kind of defined the whole city. It was based on a lotus leaf.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that created a very iconic um, structure for Hanoi. And sometimes that's
Thank
more
you,
important
architect.
than anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think there's a
All right.
question here, Nikki, by from
Yes.
Yvette
Go ahead. Go ahead,
Fernandez.
Brian. Yes, I was just looking
Um,
at that.
what do you do with strong-willed clients who want to push their own ideas? I think he
I
declines them.
now sometimes you have to work
Joke
with
lang.
it, but I just keep quiet until they make the mistake and they realize it's a mistake, even if it's already built. And of course, sometimes they won't admit it, right? But sometimes they would say, "Okay, you're right. Let's knock it down."
But
Mhm.
I think connected to that, how do you work with more feminine clients who are not into modern minimalism, like the ones who want American classic, contemporary,
No, they don't go
people
to me.
who they
They
don't go to
yeah,
you?
they would know.
They would
They
know,
would
yeah.
know. Our
Yeah,
architect
I agree.
Ed's design approach is very distinct that they would
Yeah,
know
so
not
you don't
to.
come to me to make me do a Mediterranean house or
That's right.
an
Yeah.
Asian
Yeah.
house.
Okay. We had a question here. Ah, Architect Ed, for newly licensed architects, what are the most important skills you think we should master as we learn more in the industry? This is coming from Catherine Trigo.
But it's
That's a
really
good question.
knowing how to build, like knowing materials, knowing how. I mean, you can be licensed, but if you don't know how to build things, put things together, um, that's more important. You know, I think my
Mm-hmm.
dad is a good example. He knows material. He knows how to put together material. So everyone needs to train themselves to knowing how to feel material, how it connects, how it's treated, um, how it performs in the long run. That's more important than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the design, you kind of work your way, um, having your own kind of way of approach by working, just constantly
Mm-hmm.
practicing your craft. The process of designing is a way you think about how eventually how you evolve the design. It's not some kind of theory in a book, right? But
Yeah.
you kind of work it out in your practice.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Architect. This one is coming from an anonymous sender. He says, I think this is a very fan question. He asks, Architect Ed, at this point in your career, what dream projects do you still want to be able to do?
Well, a whole city, how
An entire city.
an entire city.
Okay.
That's still a dream. I don't know when it's gonna
Mm-hmm.
happen, but I know exactly how to do it. But I just need an opportunity to do it.
Hanap tayo ng
Okay, we
city,
have
Nikki.
another
Ah.
one.
Hanap tayo.
Yes, let's do it. This one is coming from, again, an anonymous attendee. He says, for Architect Calma, after a year like 2020, where where everyone is given a chance to restart, do you still recommend spending years outside the country to work or study in the design field? Or do you believe creatives should stay in the country and work together to see what emerges, since
Yeah,
globalism has
you know,
taken a
I
shift?
um, coming to Manila in like after a long stint in New York, I was kind of depressed for a few years, but I realized that there are so many opportunities here that needs to be
Mm-hmm.
taken, and there are just so many. And if you don't see that, I don't know where you're looking, but there are many opportunities here for creatives, for new industries, new creative industries.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to like work it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Work it out, y'all. Okay, this one is coming from Baksia. You've been in the practice the past 20 years in the Philippines. If you reflect what was crucial in your architectural formation the first 10 years, the latter 10 years, and what are you looking forward to for future state of Philippine architecture and design?
Oh, okay, Buck. That's
So
always the hard.
first first 10
Good
years and
question ni Bak.
then latter 10
Yeah.
years.
Why it's first 10 years. Sorry. Well, I can say the next 10 years. Um, Now having a kind of a clearer idea what I want to do than the first 10 years. Um, it's really you know making sure that what you're gonna do is gonna create an incredible impact, small scale and large scale. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and in terms of expression, it's, you just have to kind of discover it along the way. It's still very fluid along the way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I have to admit, like maybe the first 10 years, there's still a lot of figuring out um, and still kind of learning from dealing with like clients and the economies and builders. But
Mm-hmm.
now I kind of know how they all work, and with this new situation, I feel that there would be less. I mean, there could be new opportunities for contractors and architects to kind of join together um, and build things that have less manpower,
Mm-hmm.
more figured out, before more figured out in drawing and fabrication before coming into a into a project. So yeah, so it's more mechanized, more figured out, um, computerized, uh,
Mm-hmm.
fabricated. I think it's the end of custom custom made things by hand, or it's all going to be machine, uh, but then still have this idea of flexibility and um, customization with
Mm-hmm.
mechanization.
Yeah.
All right. We have one last question. This one is for Architect Ed and Brian. So maybe you can get Brian's answers first. Um, anonymous sender says, if you could design for anyone living or not, who would you want to design for? So this is our final question. So let's make it a fun one.
Hirap naman yun, Nikki. Ikaw muna sumagot,
Fun
Nikki.
nga!
Ikaw muna.
If I could design for
if you're,
anyone living,
if nag-graduate ka
Architect
na,
Ed. So he can tell me everything wrong with my design
no,
approach.
I think for me, it would be designing for my parents, like their kitchen.
Okay.
Kasi, to be
Okay.
honest, we're all in this culture wherein we're very connected to our family, diba? So Architect
Mm-hmm.
Ed, is inspired by Architect Lore. My family, we carry Elba appliances, so I've always been connected with the Italian brands because of them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so around 10 years ago, I left the family business and started Modularity Home with Bettina, my wife. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it wasn't something that they initially was on board with. But now,
Yeah.
after 10 years of experience working and doing all these kitchens, I think they're slowly, becoming proud of what we're doing. So I think if we design something for them and they actually use it, um, when they build a new place, I think it would be a fun thing to do for me. Very personal and, something that I'm
Yeah.
passionate about for
Mm-hmm.
the family.
Mhm.
Hindi yun fun, no? Masyadong seryoso. Sorry.
What if I
Heartfelt.
think I'll have a
Heartfelt.
serious answer?
Go ahead. No, please,
But
Architect Ed.
no, I want to get into mass production of
Mm-hmm.
houses, of objects, but done in a mass production, but there's still customization, um, because environment plays a lot, right? If you can't design always for the richest person in the country, or because
Yeah.
the impact is very small. I mean, their space is
Mm-hmm.
only like a small parcel of land, or even in a development, it's only like a piece of land. But if
Few
you design
hectares. Yeah.
for everyone, then your impact would be greater, right? So, but to think about how mass production customization can impact, uh, you know, uh, uh, the land. how,
Mhm.
or then it's a challenging thing that I want to get into.
All right. Well, thank you once again, Architect Ed, Brian, and yes, Architect Ed, for sharing your time with us and personally giving us his invaluable insights on modern design and where it all began from him. Everyone learned a lot. I surely learned a lot, and it's just such an honor to have heard from you and picked your brain a little bit. So maybe Architect Ed, we can just ask for a few words from you for the many students and industry partners, clients, and friends who have joined us today. Maybe just
Mhm.
final words.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Brian. Nikki, and thanks for having me. Um, well, the only message I have for students is really to find your own way of doing things and try to learn as much as possible while you're young, and try to be more aware of your environment, because you have to design with environment in mind. It's not some kind of vacuum in a capsule, but you have to be more, I guess, know how the city works, and try to critique the city, because I enjoy looking at architecture, other people's work, right? It's not, because I like design, right? I think everyone
Mm-hmm.
wants that to create a city that we all like living in, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so everyone has to contribute to the whole city, to the whole country. Uh, Good design, right?
Thank you very much, Architect Ed, once again. Of course, we also have a Modularity Home to thank for bringing us together today, and they are the reason for why these conversations just keep getting better and better each time. So, Brian, is there anything that you'd like to say before we wrap things up?
So I wanted to say thank you to everybody who spent time with us today. There's 300 people who actually listened the whole time. Appreciate your time, and hopefully, you get to watch more of these episodes if we prepare more of this for you. Nikki, thank you for hosting once again. You're always great. Um, Ed, thanks for making the time for us. I know how busy you are. Um, Ed's very articulate and sometimes very intimidating, but I wanted to share to this community, how we usually talk, and the things that I usually learn from him. So because of that, I think he becomes less intimidating and he becomes someone who we all can learn from,
Am I
right?
intimidating?
Diba? Baka ako lang takot sa kanya.
Ikaw lang.
Mukha, Brian.
Oh, sabi sa'yo nakakatakot eh. Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks,
Yeah, thanks.
Brian. All right. You guys, if you have any more questions, you may follow and reach out to Modularity Home and Laura Calma and Partners via the contact details flashed on your screens. We actually had a lot of really technical questions that can be best addressed by these respective offices. Once again, thank you, Architect Ed, Calma, Brian Hontiveros of Modularity
Thanks.
Home, and of course,
Thank you.
our audience this afternoon for tuning in and joining our conversation. We hope that you can join us again for another episode coming soon. Meanwhile, this has been Nikki Gil-Albert for Mod Talks. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.